War is ruthless. But for those who became prisoners, it was a battle that never ended. The Pacific theater of World War II saw thousands of Allied soldiers captured by Japanese forces, sent to brutal POW camps, and subjected to unthinkable conditions. Some perished. Others endured. And a few escaped. Today, we uncover the harsh realities of Japanese POW camps and the incredible survival stories of the men who refused to be broken. The fall of Singapore, the Bataan Death March, the battles in the Pacific, each of these left thousands of Allied troops at the mercy of the Imperial Japanese Army. Unlike in Europe, where the Geneva Convention somewhat restrained German camps, in Japanese captivity, mercy was rarely granted. For the captured, the war was far from over. It had only just begun. For many Allied soldiers, the war didn't end with a bullet, it ended with surrender. The fall of Singapore in 1942 was the largest British military surrender in history. The Bataan Death March in the Philippines saw over 70,000 American and Filipino troops forced to march over 60 miles in blistering heat with no food or water. Those who fell behind were executed. The captors showed no mercy. Prisoners were crammed into suffocating boxcars, enduring journeys lasting days. No food, no water, no space to sit. Many suffocated or died from dehydration before even reaching the prison camps. But those who survived the journey had no idea of the horror awaiting them. Japanese POW camps were infamous for their severe mistreatment of prisoners. Forced labor, starvation, beatings, and disease were daily struggles. Prisoners worked on railways, dug tunnels, and endured cruel punishments for the slightest infractions. One of the most notorious was the Burma-Thailand Railway, also known as the Death Railway, where over 100,000 laborers perished due to exhaustion and abuse. Food rations were scarce, often just a handful of rice. Malnutrition set in quickly. With little medicine, dysentery, malaria, and beriberi swept through the camps like wildfire. The prisoners had to rely on sheer willpower to survive, making every bite of stolen food or every sip of clean water a triumph. These were not just prison camps, they were hell on earth. Food rations were barely enough to sustain life, bowls of watery rice or rotten vegetables. Disease spread rapidly, and medical care was non-existent. Japanese guards inflicted brutal punishments for the slightest infractions, and forced labor was relentless. The prisoners were broken, but not defeated. The captors didn't just break bodies, they tried to break minds. Many prisoners were subjected to brutal interrogations and torture, forced to sign false confessions, or used for propaganda. Yet, even in the darkest moments, some found strength in secret acts of defiance, whispered jokes, hidden radios, or even small notes passed among prisoners to keep hope alive. Many were sent to work on the infamous Death Railway in Burma. Under the scorching sun, they laid tracks through dense jungles, working 18-hour days with nothing but crude tools. The conditions were unimaginable. Malaria, dysentery, and exhaustion claimed thousands of lives. If you collapsed, you were beaten. If you resisted, you were executed. But even in these brutal conditions, the human spirit refused to be broken. Despite the suffering, many prisoners resisted in whatever way they could. Some stole medical supplies. Others deliberately worked slowly, sabotaging projects meant to aid the Japanese war effort. One remarkable story is that of British Major Philip Toosey, a POW in Thailand who covertly helped fellow prisoners while being forced to oversee the construction of the infamous bridge over the River Kwai. Survival wasn't just about enduring suffering, it was about resisting in whatever way possible. Some stole extra food to keep others alive. Some risked their lives by building secret radios to listen for news of the war. Others kept journals and drawings, documenting their suffering in hopes that history would remember. Despite everything, they held on to hope. For some, survival meant only one thing: escape. A handful of POWs managed the impossible. In 1944, a group of Australian prisoners in Singapore dug a tunnel under their barracks. They slipped away under the cover of darkness, evading Japanese patrols. Some reached safety, while others were tragically recaptured and executed. If you find these stories of resilience fascinating, make sure to hit the subscribe button and stay with us for more untold wartime stories. Some prisoners attempted the impossible: escape. Tunnels were dug beneath barbed wire fences, disguises were created, and daring plans were made. But for every successful escape, dozens were captured and executed as a warning to others. Still, the desire for freedom never died. In 1945, as the war turned against Japan, Allied forces began liberating the camps. The world saw the horrors firsthand: starved prisoners, mass graves, and survivors too weak to even stand. Despite their suffering, many walked away with their heads held high, proving that even in the face of unimaginable cruelty, the human spirit is unbreakable. As the war came to an end in 1945, Allied forces uncovered the true horrors of these camps. Soldiers who once stood strong were reduced to skin and bone, barely able to stand. But they had survived. Against all odds, they had made it through. And their stories would not be forgotten. After the war, the world sought justice. The Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal held many Japanese officers accountable for their actions, sentencing some to death, while others lived the rest of their lives in infamy. Yet, for the survivors, justice wasn't always enough. Many struggled with trauma, carrying their scars, both physical and emotional, for the rest of their lives. The war may have ended, but the scars remained. Many survivors carried the trauma for the rest of their lives. Some found solace in sharing their stories, ensuring the world would never forget the price of war. Others remained silent, unable to relive the nightmare. Their sacrifices must never be forgotten. Through unimaginable suffering, they endured, resisted, and survived. The stories of those who endured the horrors of Japanese POW camps must never be forgotten. Their strength, resilience, and sacrifices remind us of the true cost of war. If you found this story compelling, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's untold stories. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and never forget the heroes of the past.